In the heart of Oregon's Columbia River Gorge, where the air carried the damp scent of pine and the distant roar of waterfalls, Hawthorne Manor stood like a relic of forgotten dreams, its gray stone walls cloaked in the morning fog. The estate, perched on a wooded bluff overlooking the churning river below, was both grand and desolate, its towering windows catching slivers of pale light that barely warmed the vast rooms within. William Carver, once a poet whose verses danced with the rhythms of life, now moved through the manor like a ghost, his footsteps echoing on polished oak floors. His world had crumbled 9 years ago when his wife Eleanor died in a car accident, her car skidding off a rain-slicked road just days after their daughter Lily was born. The tragedy had silenced his pen, his heart, and the manor itself, which seemed to hold its breath in deference to his grief. Lily, now 8, was believed to be blind from birth. Her soft hazel eyes wide but unseeing, fixed on nothing, as she clutched a worn stuffed rabbit named Button, its fur matted from years of being her only companion. William's days revolved around her, a quiet ritual of care that filled the silence where his poetry once lived. Each morning he rose before dawn, the weight of the manor pressing against his chest, and prepared a simple breakfast: a slice of toasted bread, a smear of butter, and a glass of milk for Lily, set on a long mahogany table where only 2 chairs were ever used. The clink of a spoon against a glass was the loudest sound in the dining room, a space that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. William's hands, once nimble with a pen, now fumbled as he helped Lily dress, buttoning her sweater with care, brushing her chestnut hair, until it gleamed in the dim light. She sat still, her face serene, but vacant, her fingers tracing the frayed edges of Button's ears. The manor, designed to welcome light with its soaring windows and glass doors, had become a mirror of William's sorrow since Eleanor's death. The sunlight that streamed through those windows seemed to mock the chill within, illuminating dust motes that drifted like memories in the air. William often led Lily to the drawing room, a cavernous space with velvet drapes and a grand fireplace, where he read to her from children's books tales of talking animals and faraway lands. His voice, steady but strained, faltered at times, searching for a response that rarely came. Yet every so often, Lily's brow would crease, or her lips would twitch, and William clung to these fleeting signs as proof that somewhere deep within his daughter was still there, waiting to be reached. The manor's isolation was complete. William had severed ties with the world after Eleanor's death, declining invitations, ignoring letters from old friends, and letting his once vibrant social circle fade into silence. The staff, a cook, a groundskeeper, and a maid, moved through the house like shadows, their voices hushed, their presence unobtrusive. They whispered among themselves about the manor's gloom, about the poet who no longer wrote, and about the little girl who seemed lost in a world of darkness. One servant claimed to have heard Lily hum a tune at night. Another swore she turned her head when a door creaked, but William dismissed these as wishful thinking, unable to bear the false hope they stirred. His life had settled into a rhythm as relentless as the river below, each day blending into the next, marked only by the rituals of caring for Lily and the ache of Eleanor's absence. At night, he sat in his study, a small room lined with books and a typewriter that had gathered dust for years. He would type a line or two, then stop, the words feeling like betrayals of the life he had lost. Outside, the wind howled through the gorge, carrying the scent of wet earth and the distant rumble of the river, a constant reminder of the world moving on without him. Lily was his anchor, his reason to rise each morning, but also his deepest wound. Every doctor had confirmed her blindness, their diagnoses delivered with clinical certainty that left no room for hope. William had accepted it, or so he thought. But each time he looked into Lily's unseeing eyes, A part of him rebelled against the truth. He wondered if he had failed her just as he believed he had failed Eleanor by not being there when her car spun out of control. On certain afternoons he took Lily outside to the manor's sprawling gardens, where wildflowers bloomed in defiance of the fog. He guided her small hand to touch the petals of a lupine, describing their violet hue, their soft texture. "This is purple, like the sky at dusk," he said, his voice soft, searching her face for a reaction. Lily rarely spoke, but once her lips curved into the faintest smile, and William's heart surged with a fragile, desperate hope. He lived for these moments, rare, as they were clinging to them like a man drowning in the river below. One gray morning, as the fog hung heavy over the gorge, a knock echoed through the manor, sharp and unexpected. William opened the heavy oak door to find a woman standing on the porch, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat bun, her green eyes carrying a quiet strength beneath a shadow of weariness. She introduced herself as Clara Hensley, her voice calm but firm, applying for the position of housekeeper and caretaker for Lily. William studied her, his gaze wary. He had interviewed others before, some too eager, others too curious about the manor's tragedies, but Clara was different. She stood with a stillness that felt like a mirror to his own, her presence neither intrusive nor demanding. During their conversation, she shared that she had been a pediatric nurse in a Portland hospital, accustomed to soothing children through pain and fear. Her voice faltered as she added, "I lost my son to leukemia 2 years ago. I couldn't stay in the hospital after that." The words hung between them heavy with shared grief. William saw in her eyes the same hollow ache he carried, and without fully understanding why he felt a flicker of trust, he nodded, saying little, and invited her to start the next day. Clara's arrival marked a subtle shift in the manor's rhythm. She moved through the house with care, dusting long-neglected corners, opening curtains to let in slivers of light. Her steps were soft, as if she sensed the weight of the memories embedded in the walls. In the kitchen one morning, she found Lily sitting by a window, clutching Button, her face bathed in the pale glow of dawn. Clara paused, struck by the girl's delicate features, her eyes seeming to catch the light in a way that felt almost alive. She sat across from Lily, saying nothing, letting the silence settle between them. In that moment, something unspoken passed, a connection fragile but real, like a thread stretched taut across a chasm. As days passed, Clara's presence became a quiet force. She cleaned the manor's unused rooms, uncovering traces of Eleanor's life. A shawl draped over a chair, a book of poetry left open on a table. Each discovery stirred William's grief, but also a strange comfort, as if Clara's touch was gently waking the house from its long slumber. One afternoon, while tidying the drawing room, Clara dragged a heavy chair across the floor, its legs scraping against the wood. Lily, sitting nearby with Button, tilted her head toward the sound, her eyes flickering, as if searching. Clara froze, her heart quickening. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a crack in the wall of certainty that had defined Lily's life. She continued her task, pretending not to notice, but the moment lingered a spark in the darkness of her doubt. Clara began to watch Lily more closely, noting how the girl's fingers tightened on Button when a door slammed, how her face turned toward the clatter of a dropped spoon. One evening, as she lit a candle in the dining room, Clara saw Lily's head tilt toward the flame, her eyes narrowing as if straining to see. The sight sent a chill through her, not of fear, but of possibility. She wanted to tell William to share the fragile hope blooming in her chest, but his guarded demeanor stopped her. William, for his part, noticed Clara's quiet attention to Lily, the way she spoke softly to the girl, never pushing for a response. It unsettled him, stirring memories of Eleanor's warmth, and he found himself both drawn to and wary of this stranger who seemed to see what he could not. That night, as the wind roared through the gorge, William sat in his study staring at the blank page in his typewriter. The weight of years pressed against him, Eleanor's death, Lily's blindness, his own failure to protect them. He thought of Clara, her steady presence, her unspoken grief. For the first time in years, he felt a stirring not of poetry, but of something alive, something that frightened him as much as it intrigued him. Outside, the river churned its voice, a constant companion to the manor's silence. Inside, Clara lay awake in her small room, the flicker of Lily's head toward the candle replaying in her mind. She knew she was standing on the edge of something vast, something that could change everything. The manor, once a prison of grief, was beginning to breathe, and Clara sensed she had been drawn here not by chance, but by a purpose she had yet to fully understand. The fog clung to the Columbia River gorge like a shroud wrapping Hawthorne Manor in a damp, whispering silence that seemed to seep into its very walls. The estate's sprawling gardens, wild with ferns and blooming rhododendrons, stretched toward the dense forest where the air was thick with the scent of moss and cedar. Inside, the manor's dim corridors and high-ceilinged rooms held a stillness that Clara Hensley, now a week into her role as housekeeper, moved through with cautious reverence. Her presence had stirred something in the house, a subtle shift that William Carver felt but could not name. He watched her from a distance, his poet's eye noting the way her hands, calloused from years as a nurse, handled the manor's relics with care. A chipped teacup, a faded tapestry, a photograph of Eleanor, smiling in a sunlit meadow. Clara's auburn hair caught the weak morning light as she worked, and her quiet efficiency unnerved him, as if she were uncovering secrets the manor had long kept hidden. Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, remained the center of his world, her hazel eyes unseeing, her small hands clutching her stuffed rabbit button as she sat in the drawing room or by the kitchen window. Yet Clara's arrival had sparked a question in William's mind, one he dared not voice. What if Lily's darkness was not as absolute as he had been told? Clara, for her part, could not shake the image of Lily tilting her head toward the flicker of a candle, a fleeting gesture that had lodged in her heart like a splinter. As a pediatric nurse, she had learned to read the smallest signs in children, the twitch of a lip, the tightening of a fist, and Lily's subtle reactions felt like a language she was beginning to understand. She began to test her suspicions, her movements deliberate but gentle, as if coaxing a fragile creature from hiding. One morning, while sweeping the parlor, she let a brass candlestick slip from her grasp, its clatter echoing through the room. Lily, seated on a velvet cushion, with button flinched her head turning toward the sound, her eyes narrowing as if straining against an invisible veil. Clara's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral, continuing her task as if nothing had happened. Later that day, she drew back the heavy curtains in the dining room, letting a flood of pale light spill across the mahogany table. Lily, eating a slice of toast, paused, her face tilting toward the window, her fingers tightening on Button's worn fur. Clara held her breath, watching as the girl's lips parted as if she might speak, but the moment passed and Lily returned to her silence. These small experiments became Clara's secret, a private ritual she conducted in the quiet hours of the manor. She was careful not to alarm William, whose protectiveness over Lily bordered on obsession. He hovered near his daughter, his gray eyes sharp with a mix of love and fear, as if any change might shatter the fragile balance of their lives. Clara understood his caution. She carried her own wound scars, left by the death of her son, Ethan, who had slipped away in a hospital bed 2 years ago, his small body ravaged by leukemia. The memory surged unbidden as she dusted a bookshelf in the library, her fingers brushing a volume of William's poetry, its pages yellowed but untouched for years. She paused, opening the book to a poem about a river carrying light to the sea, and her chest tightened with a familiar ache. Ethan had loved stories, his laughter filling her tiny Portland apartment, until illness stole it away. She had left nursing after his death, unable to bear the sight of other children fighting for life while her own was gone. Now, in the manor's silence, Lily's presence felt like a second chance, a fragile thread connecting her to the boy she had lost. William, too, was wrestling with ghosts. He found himself drawn to Clara's quiet strength, the way she moved through the manor without judgment, her green eyes holding a grief he recognized. One evening, as the sun dipped below the gorge, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, he joined her in the garden, where Lily sat on a stone bench, her hands tracing the petals of a wild flower. "Eleanor loved these gardens," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the rustle of leaves. She'd spend hours here, sketching the flowers, planning a life for Lily. Clara nodded, her gaze on Lily, who seemed to lean toward the fading light. "She must have been remarkable," Clara said softly, and William's throat tightened. He rarely spoke of Eleanor, but Clara's presence made the memories feel less like knives. "She was," he said, his eyes distant. "When she died, I thought I'd lost everything. But Lily, she's all I have left." Clara met his gaze, seeing the weight he carried, and for a moment their shared silence felt like a bridge across their separate pains. Clara's suspicions about Lily grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, while tidying the nursery, a room frozen in time with pastel walls and a rocking chair where Eleanor once sang, she found a locked drawer in an old oak desk. Curiosity tugged at her, and after ensuring Lily was with William, she pried it open with a hairpin. Inside was a folder of medical records, yellowed and brittle, bearing the name Dr. Samuel Holt, a Portland ophthalmologist who had treated Lily as an infant. The notes were clinical, detailing her supposed congenital blindness, but a handwritten scribble caught Clara's eye, "Monitor pupil response." Her heart sank. Why monitor something if the case was hopeless? She tucked the folder under her arm, her mind racing. That evening, as she served dinner, roast chicken and potatoes, the scent filling the dining room, she watched Lily closely. When she dropped a fork, the clatter sharp in the quiet Lily's head snapped toward the sound, her eyes flickering, as if chasing a shadow. Clara's hands trembled as she cleared the plates, the weight of her discovery pressing against her chest. The next morning, Clara resolved to push further. In the drawing room, she set up a lantern on a low table, its soft glow casting patterns on the walls. "Lily," she said gently, kneeling beside the girl, "I'm going to light something. Tell me if you feel anything okay." Lily's face remained still, but as Clara lit the lantern, moving it slowly from side to side, Lily's eyes widened, her lips trembling. I see a glow," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Clara's heart leapt, tears pricking her eyes. She wanted to shout, to call William, but fear of raising false hope stopped her. Instead, she squeezed Lily's hand, whispering, "That's good, sweetheart. We'll try again tomorrow." When William entered the room moments later, his face drawn from another sleepless night, Clara hesitated. "She's been quiet today," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. William nodded, unaware of the miracle unfolding before him. That night, Clara lay awake in her small room, the manor creaking around her like a living thing. The folder of medical records sat on her bedside table, its secrets burning in her mind. She thought of Ethan, his small hand in hers during his final days, and of Lily, whose faint reactions felt like a promise of redemption. Downstairs, William sat in his study, the typewriter silent before him. He thought of Clara's gentle presence, the way she spoke to Lily, with a warmth he hadn't heard since Eleanor. For the first time in years, he typed a full sentence, the keys clacking in the quiet. In the darkness, a spark. He stopped, his hands shaking, unsure if it was poetry or something more. Outside, the river roared through the gorge, its voice a constant companion urging the manor toward a truth it had long buried. Clara, too, felt the pull of that truth, knowing she was on the edge of something that could shatter the manor's silence forever. She resolved to uncover more, to find the key to Lily's hidden light, even if it meant facing the shadows of her own past. Rain lashed against the towering windows of Hawthorne Manor, the Columbia River gorge cloaked in a gray veil that mirrored the storm brewing within its walls. The air inside carried a new charge, as if the manor itself sensed the unraveling of long-buried truths. Clara Hensley moved through the house with purpose, her auburn hair damp from a morning walk through the misty gardens, her green eyes sharp with determination. Lily Carver, the 8-year-old girl believed blind since birth, had whispered words that still echoed in Clara's mind. "I see a glow." Those words, fragile as a candle flame, had ignited a fierce hope in Clara, a former nurse whose instincts screamed that Lily's darkness was not absolute. The discovery of Dr. Samuel Holt's medical records in a locked drawer had deepened her suspicions, hinting at a deliberate act behind Lily's condition. William Carver. Lily's father stood on the edge of this revelation, his poet's heart torn between the grief that had defined him since his wife Eleanor's death and a tentative belief that his daughter might see the world he thought lost to her. The manor, once a tomb of silence, now hummed with the possibility of change, its vast rooms catching slivers of light that seemed to pulse with life. Clara's days were now a delicate dance of care and investigation. She tended to Lily with a tenderness born of her own loss. Her son Ethan, taken by leukemia 2 years prior, while quietly testing the girl's responses to light and shadow. In the drawing room, she placed a red apple on the table, its color vivid against the dark wood. "Lily, can you tell me what this feels like?" she asked, guiding the girl's hand to the fruit. Lily's fingers traced its curve and her head tilted slightly as if drawn to its brightness. "It's warm," she murmured, her voice a whisper of wonder. Clara's heart raced, but she kept her tone calm, noting every reaction in a small notebook she hid in her apron. William, watching from the doorway, felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to believe, but years of medical verdicts weighed heavy, each one declaring Lily's blindness irreversible. "She's just feeling the texture," he told himself, yet the doubt in his own voice betrayed him. Clara's quiet insistence was chipping away at the walls he'd built around his heart walls erected after Eleanor's car skidded off a rain-soaked road 9 years ago, leaving him to raise Lily alone. The medical records haunted Clara. Late one night, in her small room overlooking the gorge, she pored over the faded pages, her flashlight casting shadows on the walls. Dr. Samuel Holt's notes were meticulous, detailing Lily's early examinations, but a single line stood out: pupil response inconsistent with congenital blindness. Clara's breath caught. Why had Holt, a trusted family friend, declared Lily's case hopeless? The question gnawed at her, and she knew she needed answers beyond the manor's walls. She contacted Dr. Rachel Lee, a former colleague from her nursing days in Portland, now an ophthalmologist with a reputation for tenacity. Rachel agreed to meet, and the next morning Clara drove through the rain-slicked roads of the gorge to a small cafe in Portland, the folder of records tucked under her coat. Over steaming coffee, Rachel examined the documents, her brow furrowing. "These eye drops," she said, pointing to a prescription note, contain scopolamine at an unusually high dose. Long-term use could dilate pupils to the point of mimicking blindness, suppressing any natural response to light. Clara's hands trembled around her mug. "You're saying this was intentional?" Rachel's eyes met hers grave. "It's not a mistake. This is a formula designed to deceive." Clara returned to the manor with the weight of Rachel's words pressing against her. She found Lily in the nursery, sitting by the rocking chair where Eleanor once sang, clutching, "Button her stuffed rabbit." Clara knelt beside her, holding a flashlight. "Lily, let's try something," she said softly, flicking the light on and moving it slowly. Lily's eyes flickered, her lips parting. "It's bright," she said, her voice trembling with discovery. Clara's throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. She wanted to tell William everything, but fear of shattering his fragile hope held her back. Instead, she tucked Lily into bed, whispering, "We're going to find the light, sweetheart." Downstairs, William sat in the dining room, the rain's rhythm against the windows, a mirror to his restless thoughts. Clara's presence had stirred something in him, a warmth he hadn't felt since Eleanor. He thought of her laughter, her sketches of the gorgeous wildflowers, and how he'd locked those memories away after her death. Now Clara's quiet strength was unlocking them, and with them a flicker of hope for Lily. The next day, Clara showed William the medical records, her voice steady but urgent. These drops weren't helping Lily. They were keeping her in the dark. William's face paled as he read Rachel's analysis, his hands shaking. "Holt was Eleanor's friend," he said, his voice raw. "He came to her funeral, held my hand, told me Lily would never see. I trusted him." The betrayal cut deeper than grief, a knife twisting in the wound of his failure to protect his daughter. He remembered Holt's visits, his calm assurances, the prescriptions he'd filled without question. Why would he do this? William whispered, his poet's mind spinning stories of greed or malice. Clara placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "We'll find out," she said. "But first we stop the drops." William nodded, his jaw tight, a fire kindling in his gray eyes, a father's resolve to right a wrong. Without the eye drops, Lily began to change. Each morning, Clara flung open the curtains, letting sunlight flood the manor's rooms. Lily turned toward the windows, her eyes blinking rapidly as if startled by the world's brightness. In the garden, Clara held up a red flower, its petals vivid against the green. "What do you see, Lily?" she asked. Lily hesitated, then pointed, her voice small but clear. "It's like fire." William, standing nearby, felt his knees weaken. He sank onto a bench, tears streaming down his face. "She sees it," he whispered, the words both a prayer and a revelation. Clara's heart swelled, but the truth about Holt loomed like a storm cloud. She learned he still practiced in Portland, his clinic, a sleek office in the city's heart. William's anger grew a quiet fury that replaced his years of numbness. "I need to face him," he told Clara one evening, his voice steady but laced with pain. "I need to know why he stole her light." Their bond deepened through shared purpose. One rainy afternoon, as they sat with Lily in the drawing room, William shared a memory of Eleanor teaching him to dance in the garden, her laughter echoing through the gorge. Clara listened, her own memories of Ethan surfacing, his small hand in hers, his love for fireflies. "I used to catch them for him," she said, her voice breaking. William reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining, a silent acknowledgement of their parallel griefs. Lily, playing nearby, pointed to a blue card Clara had set out. "Sky," she said, her voice stronger now. William and Clara exchanged a look, their hearts lifting. The manor was no longer a prison, but a place of awakening, its walls echoing with Lily's tentative words and the promise of truth. Clara's resolve hardened. She gathered more evidence, finding old prescription bottles hidden in a basement storeroom, their labels bearing Holt's name. Rachel confirmed the compound's effects, warning that prolonged use could have caused permanent damage, but Lily's responses suggested her vision was recovering. William, meanwhile, prepared to confront Holt, his poet's soul burning with questions. He drove to Portland one stormy morning, the city's skyline blurred by rain. Holt's office was sterile, its walls lined with awards, a stark contrast to the man's deceit. When William demanded answers, Holt's face remained impassive, his voice smooth. "You misunderstood, William. I was protecting Lily from false hope." But William saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the crack in his facade. He left without answers, but with a vow to seek justice, not just for Lily, but for the years he'd lost to despair. Back at the manor, Lily's progress was a quiet miracle. She named colors red for apples, green for leaves, her voice growing bolder each day. The gorge's beauty, once a backdrop to sorrow, now framed her awakening. Clara and William sat with her one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Lily pointed her eyes wide. "It's like a painting," she said, and William wept, his heart breaking open with joy and rage. The truth about Holt was a wound, but Lily's light was a balm, and as Clara's hand found his, William knew they were no longer alone in their fight. The manor, bathed in the glow of dusk, stood as a testament to their shared resolve, its silence giving way to the soft music of a family reborn. The Columbia River Gorge shimmered under a late summer sun, its waters catching the light like a ribbon of silver winding through the lush Oregon wilderness. Hawthorne Manor, once a fortress of grief, now pulsed with life, its towering windows flung open to let in the breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. The heavy silence that had cloaked the estate for years was gone, replaced by the soft clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation, and the bright bubbling laughter of Lily Carver, who at 8 years old was discovering a world she had been told was forever dark. William Carver. Her father stood in the garden watching Lily chase a butterfly, her chestnut hair glinting as she moved her hazel eyes, once thought unseeing, tracking the insect's erratic path. Clara Hensley, the former nurse who had uncovered the truth about Lily's suppressed vision, stood beside him, her auburn hair loose in the wind, her green eyes soft with a joy that mirrored his own. The manor was no longer a tomb, but a home, its walls echoing with the promise of a new beginning, yet the shadow of Dr. Samuel Holt's betrayal lingered, a wound that demanded justice, even as the family forged a future bathed in light. Lily's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Since Clara had stopped the scopolamine-laced eye drops that had kept her pupils dilated, mimicking blindness, Lily's world had burst into color. Each morning, she stood by the drawing-room windows, her face tilted toward the sunlight, her eyes blinking as if drinking in the world. "It's yellow, like my dress," she said one day, pointing to a sunflower Clara had placed on the table. William, hearing her, felt his heart swell, the poet's words he'd long buried stirring within him. Clara introduced simple games flashcards with bold shapes. A red ball tossed gently across the room, and Lily responded with growing confidence, naming circles, squares, and colors with a voice that grew stronger each day. She began attending a small school in a nearby town, returning home with stories of friends, chalk drawings, and the blue of the classroom walls. Her laughter, once a rare whisper, now rang through the manor, like a bell chasing away the shadows that had clung to its corners. William watched her with a mix of awe and guilt, haunted by the years he'd believed her blind, trusting Dr. Holt's lies without question. Clara and William's bond had deepened their shared grief. His for Eleanor, his wife lost in a car crash, and hers for Ethan, her son taken by leukemia, woven into a quiet love that neither had expected. They spent evenings in the garden, Lily playing nearby as they shared stories of their pasts. Clara spoke of Ethan's love for stargazing, how he'd name constellations despite his weakening body. William recounted Eleanor's passion for painting her canvases of the gorgeous waterfalls now stored in the attic. Their hands brushed as they spoke, their eyes meeting in moments of unspoken understanding. One afternoon, as they walked along the river's edge, Lily scampering ahead to collect smooth stones, Clara paused, her hand resting on her stomach. "William," she said, her voice trembling with a shy joy, "I'm pregnant." William froze, his gray eyes widening, then pulled her into his arms, tears spilling down his cheeks. "A new beginning," he whispered, and Lily, turning back, ran to them, hugging their legs. "I'm going to be a big sister!" She squealed, her voice bright with excitement. The manor, bathed in the golden light of dusk, seemed to hum with their shared joy. The fight for justice, however, loomed large. William had vowed to confront Dr. Samuel Holt, whose deliberate use of harmful eye drops had stolen years of light from Lily. Clara, with her nurse's precision, had gathered evidence, old prescription bottles, Holt's medical records, and Dr. Rachel Lee's analysis confirming the drop's dangerous effects. The case was set for trial in a Portland courthouse, a stark brick building overlooking the city's rain-slicked streets. As the day approached, William's anger simmered, tempered by Clara's steady presence. "We do this for Lily," she reminded him, her hand squeezing his. The trial was a spectacle, the courtroom packed with reporters and curious onlookers drawn to the story of a poet's daughter robbed of her sight. Holt, polished in a tailored suit, maintained a facade of calm, claiming he'd acted in Lily's best interest to prevent false hope. But Rachel's testimony was damning, detailing how the scopolamine had suppressed Lily's vision, a calculated act tied to Holt's financial ties to a pharmaceutical firm profiting from the drug. William took the stand, his voice steady but raw, recounting the years of despair, the trust he'd placed in Holt, a family friend who'd betrayed them for greed. He took her light. William set his eyes on Lily, who sat in the gallery clutching Clara's hand, her gaze fixed on the sunlight streaming through the windows. The judge's verdict came swiftly. Holt's medical license was revoked, and he faced imprisonment for intentional harm. The courtroom buzzed, but William felt no triumph, only a quiet sorrow for the years lost. Outside, as rain fell softly, Clara squeezed his hand. "It's over," she said. "Lily has her light now." William nodded, his eyes on his daughter, who pointed to a rainbow arcing over the gorge. "It's so pretty," Lily said, and William's heart ached with a joy he'd thought impossible. Back at the manor, the family settled into a new rhythm. Lily's drawings covered the walls, bright suns, blue rivers, and 3 figures holding hands. One afternoon, she ran to Clara, holding up a sketch. "This is us," she said, her voice clear. "Daddy, Mommy, and me." Clara's breath caught tears welling as she pulled Lily close. "I'm here, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling with love. William, standing in the doorway, felt his chest tighten, not with grief, but with a warmth he hadn't known since Eleanor. Lily had found a mother in Clara, and he a partner to share the journey. The manor's transformation was complete. Its once cold halls echoed with laughter, the clink of glasses at dinner, and Lily's chatter about school. William began writing again, his typewriter clacking late into the night, poems of light and redemption spilling onto the page. One evening he read a new piece to Clara, and Lily, his voice steady. "From shadows deep a spark is born to light the path through storm and morn." Lily clapped her eyes bright, and Clara smiled, her hand resting on her growing belly. The trial faded into memory, its weight lifted by the family's new life. They spent weekends by the river Lily collecting shells, William and Clara, walking hand in hand. One evening, as the sun sank into the gorge, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lily ran ahead, her laughter echoing. William turned to Clara, his eyes steady. "You brought us back," he said, his voice thick. "You gave Lily her light, and me my heart." Clara's eyes glistened and she leaned into him, their lips meeting in a quiet promise. The wedding came on a crisp autumn morning, the manor's gardens draped in white ribbons, the river sparkling below. Lily, in a pale blue dress with a crown of daisies scattered petals along a path lined with wild flowers. Friends and neighbors, drawn back into William's life by the manor's newfound warmth, filled the wooden chairs, their faces bright with hope. Clara appeared in a simple gown, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her smile radiant as she walked toward William. Lily placed Clara's hand in his, her small voice clear. "Now we're a family." The priest's words carried over the river's gentle roar, blessing their union. William vowed to love and protect Clara and Lily, his voice breaking with emotion. Clara, tears streaming, promised to be their light, her words a mirror to the glow that now filled their home. As they kissed, Lily cheered, and the guests erupted in applause, the gorge itself seeming to celebrate with a breeze that rustled the trees. Winter brought the birth of their son, Ethan James, named for Clara's lost son and William's father. Lily, now a proud big sister, drew pictures of 4 figures under a bright sun, her art a testament to their bond. The manor, once a place of sorrow, was now a haven of love, its walls alive with color and sound. One spring morning, William stood on the porch watching Lily and Clara chase Ethan's giggles in the garden. The river flowed below its voice, a song of renewal. He whispered to the wind, "Eleanor, do you see? Our family is whole." The past, with its pain and betrayal, had been laid to rest, and before them stretched a path lit by love, laughter, and the unyielding light of a new day.